and make us live, that would be fantastic. Great, thank you so much. Welcome, everyone. We're so glad to have you and see you again. The past couple months have flown by. It's been a little busy here in Frankfurt, especially, and so good to see your faces. You're going to notice we have several different faces on here today because you're going to have the opportunity to hear from the work group co-leads on what is really getting ready to be kicked off, as well as a legislative update as it pertained to K-12, post-secondary, and with labor and education and labor cabinet. So we are so grateful to have you on. Looking forward to the conversation and your feedback today. And so before I turn it over to Dr. Thompson, I also have with me, and I don't know if you're going to be able to see him, but I have Josiah. Josiah is from the Minnesota Higher Ed. Well, kind of like the CPE of Minnesota, and he is their P20 executive director. And so he is with us today and tomorrow. So glad to finally have Josiah. We have him booked solid with some of you guys to talk with tomorrow and just to be a part of our continuum and how we function, where we have made incredible gains and where we still have challenges. Josiah and I think, are kindred spirits and didn't even realize it. Lots of the same issues in Minnesota. So he is part of our meeting today. So I will stop there. And Dr. Thompson, if you will get us going, and you'll turn it over to Robin when you're finished.
Thank you, Amanda. As always, Amanda really is Josiah. Welcome to Kentucky. But, if you're anything like Amanda or half as good, Minnesota is really going to benefit. So good to have you with us. Thanks, Amanda. Good afternoon, everybody. It's good to see you. I mean, wow. January, we talked about what this legislative season was going to look like and the importance of us advocating for more funding for education. Well, we're 2 days out of it. The governor has the rest of the legislation, the budget, and everything he needs during this veto time. But it's been a busy one. It's been one that, in fact, has created a lot of work for a lot of us, no doubt. But it's work that's good, and it's work that needs to be done for Kentucky. And no doubt about it, at least in my mind, this P20 work is primary to the work that I'm talking about. This work that brings us all together to really focus on how we should look at and exemplify ourselves truly in a manner that makes sense to really do the things that are good in Kentucky. Makes me proud that I'm a part of this. If you're following us at all in higher education, you realize from point of improvement, we're like top 5 in almost every category of completions, attainment, enrollment, and a variety of other things. This can't happen without a systematic effort. Now, we've got a long way to go to get where we want to be in Kentucky, both in higher ed and K-12. And the conversation around education has to be that talks about how we come together to make that happen. So I want to thank you for the work you all put in this budgetary time. And in a little bit, we'll hear from Travis, myself, and others on what legislation has been passed, what it will do for us in Kentucky, and also talk a little bit about the budget. But I just want to reflect just for a few minutes that I have to talk about what we've done with P20. Josiah, I want you to hear and tell Dennis in Minnesota he needs to replicate, right? But some of the things we've done in Kentucky with the CEC that I'm really proud of. So if you go along with me, I have to read it all off here, and we won't even hit as many. But as you know, when we came together, our whole goal was just not to be meeting. It was really to lay out a process by which we could create some outcomes that would be good for Kentucky. And as I was asked to describe this in a national speech not too long ago about what we were doing with the education continuum, and they call it a program, I said, it's not a program, it's a movement. This is something that is done in a manner that helps us to create a continuous improvement process that always focuses on the student, always focuses on those that need our service the most, and bringing together the talent in this state that can hear, and the voices that can be heard and that can hear exactly what the students are needing. So that was the way that I approached that answer, and I hope y'all agree with that. But let me give you some examples of what has been done in the last little bit. Just the summer bridge programming has been absolutely wonderful. We had over half of the programs, 21, had fall to fall persistence rates. By the way, we believe in measurement too, right? Fall persistence rates that were up compared to the overall freshman cohort for each year. KCTCS programs were especially affected. 12 of the 17 programs over the last 2 years that were analyzed had higher fall to fall persistence rates for their summer bridge programming than the overall freshman class, right? And think about those students that we're serving that were needing that help in order to just to be able to be caught up. Well, they are actually they are beating those that wasn't taken apart, that didn't take a part in this. Low income students who participated at KSU, as an example, persisted at 19.3 points higher than the overall class. As a result of these improved persistence rates, you know how much we like data and money. We actually not only we made $315,000 more dollars in this setting at an institution than by relative comparison to if we didn't have that program. So it's a little money invested with big outcomes. Now, dual credit, something near and dear to all of our hearts. The General Assembly came in and increased the number of courses that were eligible for scholarship from 2 to 4, and that was great. CPE has revised the policy, Amanda and her team, we've approved it now by the board, that really is designed to match our North Star of educational attainment. And this is the first thing like an attainment for dual credit that's been seen in the US. So this gives us another North Star to look at how we can get to where we need to go in a systematic way. The Dual Credit Bridge Grant Program prioritized partnerships between higher ed and K-12 schools and gave students a chance to acclimate to dual credit processes by visiting campuses and developing a sense of belonging. So one of the issues that's happened in the past was that, okay, they're taking a college course, but they still may not know what it's like being on the campus. And being in college is more than just taking an academic course. So this goes to that other piece, right? The social and emotional and the cultural environments of the campus. We took from the ESSER and ARPA dollars funded by, thank you, KDE, that 147,000 for these 36 partnerships over 2 years are going to give us a return on investment that's much more than we'll ever be able to measure. In year one, approximately 2,000 students were impacted, 26 student and family sessions, 9 first-time programs, 5 programs used peer mentors. Grant recipients reported fewer withdrawals from dual credit courses because of this. So we are giving students an opportunity to really not only experience college, but experience what it's like to be in higher education. The other item, you know, we did on our research, our data folk, great folk, we're able to show that if you had a dual credit course, if you are coming from an underrepresented or underserved background, you actually did better in college, especially if you were an African-American student. Jo Carroll, we brought her, Jo Carroll Ellis, the executive director from KIA, came to our board meeting to talk a little bit about what's going on with KIA, but also she gave us some numbers on the dual credit funding updates. And she said in 2023, the gen ed portion of the dual credit expended $12.33 million for 26,510 students. Our work ready went from 8.12 I mean, work ready expenditures was 8.12 million for almost 21,000. The other item I will tell you, we're now measuring 4-year degrees 4 years again. Our average is 4.1, and dual credit has a lot to do with this. So we're really going deep, if you will, in talking about affordability, and the CEC has been on the forefront of helping us to get there. In our advising, I'm so proud of our Kentucky advising group. I mean, that connection between higher ed and K-12 is just unbelievable. It has worked over 80% of our districts, and over 80% of our districts in the last 2 years. And that collaboration between K-12 higher ed, KIA, and KDE has been invaluable in creating guides, toolkits, offering free resources, professional development and learning, and really creating a new kind of advising network that is not isolated or parochial based on where we're at in higher ed or K-12. That to me is well worth it, the kind of investments that's been put there. But these are only a few examples of the things that we're doing. And we could go on forever, and Amanda won't let me, to talk about so many other pieces that are great. Now, we have obviously challenges. I've been spending a lot of time, I'll be at the US DOE again, I think it's next week, talking. This FAFSA screw up has been, Diane, not a good thing, no matter how we shake it out. And we're still working through it. And we're way behind, not just on people filling out FAFSAs, but people being, accepted into college. As I said earlier, Kentucky had one of the biggest enrollments and the fastest states to recover from COVID in enrollment, but this is going to hurt us unless we somehow come together and triple down on what we need to do. The USDOE did not help us with this FAFSA rollout by no means. But, give you some examples. I'll look, currently only 27% of our students have completed a FAFSA. Joe Carroll and her staff at KIA are working diligently, as well as our people in Gear Up. Everywhere we are out there trying to do everything we can to make sure that our students are getting what they need early. And we're going to continue to work with the U.S. Department of Education, Secretary Cardona, and helping him to help us, if you will, to get us there. Our educator workforce is still very much a concern. For me not to say that would be a lie. There's just so much more that we have to do in that area, and we've got to do it together. It has to be EPSB, has to be our superintendents, has to be KDE, has to be CPE, and has to be our campuses coming together really to design a way and working with the legislature, hopefully the governor's office, to figure out a way how we can accelerate this. My argument is still clear. I'm okay with alternative pathways, but it cannot be the path that becomes the norm. We have to do a better job in getting our teachers through the kind of pathway it takes for them to be a good, high quality professional in the classroom. There's a lot more challenges, but I will close by saying that this work, there's the reason why I like the continuum. It's not of one agency. It's not of one person. It's not of one direction. It really is a set of colleagues, looking at what's important for the state with our students, coming together, being heard, creating this movement. And I'm just proud that I'm a part of it. So I'll take any questions that you may have, but to stay us on track, Robin, I'm going to assume that I didn't see any questions being asked. I do want to welcome Commissioner Robbie Fletcher to the group as soon as he gets signed in. But I look forward to talking to you all even more depth when we meet one-on-one. Robin, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Thompson. And I will keep it fairly brief with my remarks, but I do want to share some exciting news. For those of you that I haven't had the privilege of meeting, my name is Robin Kinney. I serve as the interim commissioner of the Kentucky Department of Education as we have been looking for our next permanent commissioner. And I'm really proud to be able to come to you today and say we have selected our new commissioner. We are currently under contract with Dr. Robbie Fletcher. He is the current superintendent in Lawrence County, Kentucky. Dr. Fletcher comes to us with degrees from Morehead State University and also from the University of Kentucky. And he has been the superintendent in Lawrence County for about 10 years. But he is really what I would call homegrown. He has served in lots of positions throughout Kentucky in various districts, from a teacher to an assistant principal to a principal to a superintendent, and has really worked his way up the ladder. The other thing that about Dr. Fletcher, he comes to us, he currently serves as our chair of our local superintendent advisory council. That is a statutorily created committee, and it is comprised of local school district superintendents. He was elected chair by his peers and serves in that capacity as a very respected member of our superintendents association. So we are very happy to have him here. He'll be joining us on July 1st. And it has been a bit of a challenge because people are very, very excited to have him join us. And so he is getting a lot of requests to do things even before he comes on board. And we take that as a really good sign that he was our right selected candidate. I will share with you the work that was done to as we considered those that had applied for a commissioner of the Department of Education. And I want to thank, first of all, our Kentucky Board of Education members. Diane Woods is on our call with us as a member of the Continuum, and she's on with us today. And also the support that and participation that we received, fully engaged participation from Dr. Thompson and also from Secretary Jamie Link from the Workforce and Labor Cabinet. Both of those gentlemen sit as ex officio on our boards, which is just another piece of evidence that as working together collaboratively really works for all of us. And so they were very active participants in our selection. But the things that the Kentucky Board of Education really looked for as they considered our candidates, and we had good candidates in our pool, they wanted to make sure that our commissioner was an ambassador statesperson on behalf of our department and as well as on behalf of public education in Kentucky overall. And working with the General Assembly, having a good track record there. Dr. Fletcher has served on various committees, being appointed either by the governor or appointed by General Assembly membership leadership in committees that impact education and students in the Commonwealth. So he has those relationships, and we look for him to continue to build and broaden that reach of his relationships in the General Assembly. An expert instructional leader. I would say he's a math and science guy, probably first and foremost. But of course, in leading as a superintendent, who is our chief instructional leader in our districts, he understands the ins and outs of instruction for our students. A strong organizational leader was something that was desired to lead the Kentucky Department of Education as an executive branch agency, and also making sure that our Kentucky United We Learn initiative, which was started by Dr. Glass previously, a grassroots effort of looking across the Commonwealth of Kentucky and asking all the stakeholders, what do you want to see for the future of public education in Kentucky? And I appreciate so much that Penny Christian is on the call today. Penny is very, very actively involved in Kentucky United We Learn. But we were looking for someone that will continue the momentum of Kentucky United We Learn and toward their three big goals, which are vibrant learning experiences for each and every student in the Commonwealth, innovation when it comes to, especially when it comes to assessment, as we enter into areas where our students are going to learn differently, we need to be able to assess and measure that differently. So we need an innovative assessment system that is meaningful and useful for each of our students and our folks in our local school districts. And so we have Dr. Fletcher's commitment of continuing United We Learn and moving that forward. And then also just a visionary innovator across all things related to public education, really looking at teaching and learning and what that looks like and not being afraid to try bold new things. Those are the four kind of competencies that we're looking for in our next commissioner. And we believe Dr. Fletcher meets those competencies and will be a great leader for us. It was the first time that our commissioner had to go through a Senate confirmation process. And so that was new to us. Dr. Fletcher was actually confirmed on the very last day on Monday. And it's sort of the process. We're all held in suspense until it actually happens. He was invited for a introductory meeting with the Senate Education Committee last Friday and had the opportunity to share a little bit about himself and answer questions of the Senate education members, and I think he did very well. He had lots of superintendents that came and sat in the audience to support him. Again, an expression of thinking that we have made the right selection for our job. So that has really taken a lot of time for us here at the Kentucky Department of Education. I know that he will be interested in working with the Commonwealth Education Continuum. I envision that he will be an active participant as we roll forward. And I'm looking forward for lots of you to meet him and get to know him in his upcoming role. I'm happy to answer any questions about that process or anything else about the Kentucky Department of Education and what we're working on. I know we will have an opportunity, like Dr. Thompson said, a little later to talk about legislation that has impacted or will impact our schools and districts as we move forward. And we can talk about that a little later in the presentation. I think I turn it back to Amanda at this point.
Yes, thank you, Robin, so much. And I've already confirmed Robin will be back with us in August when Dr. Fletcher is in place. And so I'm very grateful for that. And of course, grateful for Robin's leadership during this time. So we are going to hop right into our next activity day. We're going to be talking about the introduction of the Continuum work groups. If you guys remember the last two meetings, we narrowed down our focus. We looked into the data. And so we're going to actually here in just a moment give you the opportunity to hear from our co-leads. So you will see this slide a few times, but you all had narrowed it down to affordability of post-secondary education. So we are so grateful for Wendy Kane and Cassie Benedict. Wendy comes to us with her role in financial aid and student services at Murray. She has a wealth of knowledge and a college freshman. So her perspective as a parent also is invaluable. Cassie is our outreach coordinator at Kia and just keeps the roads hopping with her staff to provide assistance to so many high school students and their families. So you're going to be hearing from them. The K-12 educator workforce, you all were just very adamant that this stay as a top priority and something we look at in a different way. So we are super excited to hear from Danielle Pickens. If you had worked with the KDE a few years ago when Robin and I were in our other roles, we had worked with Urban Schools Human Capital Alliance and we had worked with them. It's not just urban schools, but they really work on recruitment and retention in innovative, creative ways. And they were an excellent partner then. I know they'll be an excellent partner now, and I look forward to that. You'll also hear from the P20 competency framework. This is a little bit different, but what you all had selected, and I think a wise choice, of really taking the profile of a learner and the graduate profile and start to crosswalk those competencies. And what does that look like as a quote, no pun intended, continuum of the education and competency piece? You'll hear from Jana Weiss and Melissa Bell from CPE and Sarah Snipes and Crystal Roll and KDE. It's already hit the ground running, and I just think the work is super exciting. And then post-secondary advising was also elevated as something that was a priority and that we needed to continue to work on. We've seen progress, but we got work to do. And so that's Mitzi Holland, who leads the Kentucky Advising Academy, and Kelly Norman, who is over currently the Launch Initiative, which incorporates a lot of these pieces into our advising work, and already brings the cabinet and the chamber and KCTCS and 4 years all to the table for similar reasons. And so we're getting ready to break out here in just a moment. You're going to get to hear from each group and give some input. But while Robin is working on orchestrating that, Robin Aber, the other piece on that is afterwards, we're going to hear from Matt Berry. We're bringing back up the discussion around how you want to measure success, progress, and impact. This is something that, or process progress and impact, excuse me. And so Matt's going to lead that conversation. We've had great meetings with the data team, but really need your input and guidance and vision around that. And as Robin Kenny said, we will wrap up the day with some legislative updates because you need to know the impacts of legislation and budget on our K-12, post-secondary, and our workforce environments. And so to know how we do our work moving forward and to enact the laws that the General Assembly has put in place. So Robin, if you will go on and divide us, we will get going.
Hey, Amanda, just to clarify, one group will go into a breakout room and one group will stay in here in the main room.
Thank you.
So if you don't get moved, it's not because we forgot you. We're just going to be meeting in the main room.
That's right. Thank you, Robin.
Okay.
And Robin, are you still moving people or as is?
I think everybody should have had a.
So I have, let's see.
You have an invitation to go to the breakout room. You might need to click on breakout room and see if you have an invitation to join.
I just have broadcast and close. So do I need to?
Okay. Let me see if I can put you.
Oh, here it is. Join room 1. Is that what you need me to do?
Yeah. All right. So those of you who are still in the room with me, the other room is going to be looking at advising and affordability first. And we're going to be looking at K-12 workforce and the P20 competencies first. So we'll start our conversation with the K-12 workforce. And so Danielle, I'm so happy to have you here today. And I'll be happy to share the slide, or if you want to you want me to do it? Is that?
Yeah, that would be great.
Okay. Yeah, I'll be happy to share the slides, and then you all can just let me know when you want to advance those. And so Danielle, I'll let you introduce yourself and kick things off.
Hey, y'all, my name is Danielle Pickens. I work with an organization called the Urban Schools Human Capital Academy. But like Amanda said, we've really branched beyond urban schools, and we're working with states, school systems across the country to really network and develop the HR leaders and the talent leaders in those spaces to solve the biggest challenges that we have. And as you all know, the teacher shortage is one of the biggest ones that we have right now. So the focus of the K-12 workforce will be really, what is it that we want to do to strengthen the K-12 workforce, educator workforce in Kentucky for you all? So we have not met yet as a group. Our first meeting is going to be April 29th, which is in just 2 weeks. I did ask for Amanda and Robin, though, to reach out to the folks who are on the committee. There are 17 of them, from folks at the state, universities, teachers, principals. It's a whole range of folks. And ask, what is it that you really want to focus on in these meetings together? And the things that came up most, and actually, Robin, maybe we'll switch between this slide and the next one. The things that came up most were the teacher shortage. 50% of people in the survey said, we really need to focus on the teacher shortage, the pipeline. We want to maintain high standards. And then some people said, we also want to expand teacher certification, right? So how do you do those two things? We want to focus on hard to staff subjects and hard to staff schools. So places like math, special education, the sciences. How are we making sure that we have teachers who are prepared and that this is a first choice of major? Many of you probably have seen this already, but the perceptions of teaching, people interested in going into teaching from college, even from high school, are way down from where they've been. So how do we reverse that trend? People wanted to know, why is this happening? Are there grant competitions available? So that was a huge focus of some of the survey results. 50% of people said, we want to do something related to the shortage and making sure that that's not such a huge issue here in Kentucky. Another third of folks said we really want to focus on teacher retention. And teacher retention and teacher shortages, they're two sides of the same coin. So many people said, we really need to focus on working conditions. How do we support our schools and making sure that working conditions, particularly in our highest need schools, are, and that are places where people want to go. They wanted to focus on school leadership, the school culture, and they said we have to keep our veteran teachers. There were a few other themes that came up. Some folks said we want to focus and make sure that there's equitable access to really good teachers. How are we making sure that our highest need students, our students of color, our students in poverty are getting access to great teachers, because there are patterns that are showing bigger disparities there than we would like. And then there were some other themes, particularly around 21st century skills and how are we making sure that our teachers and our workforce is really prepared for that. So those were the main survey results. Robin, can you go back to the previous slide for me? So what I would offer as we're thinking about this is we really want to hear what you all are thinking about, what advice you would give to this group. There have been so many ideas for how do you address the shortage. There have been so many solutions. Grow your own. We even heard this at the beginning, right? Many states are expanding their emergency certificates, allowing teachers who maybe haven't had the preparation to come into the profession. So we would love to hear your thoughts in just a few minutes. But the guiding questions for this group are going to be, where do we really want to focus? And particularly given the survey results, I'm guessing it's going to be on some combination of the teacher shortage plus teacher retention. How do we get people and how do we keep them there? Because they do work in tandem. How are we making sure that we're incorporating the voices of our key stakeholders in our focus areas? We don't want to create something that people aren't going to use. And we want to make sure that teachers, school leaders are really informing what we're talking about, so it feels very practical. When I asked folks for their sort of hopes and fears in this work, people were really worried that this was just going to be more thinking about the problem. It wasn't going to be a good use of time, and that there weren't going to be real tangible and practical solutions. So we want to make sure that we're bringing in voices of key stakeholders so that it makes sense for folks on the ground. And that we can then share this more broadly. So we want to be thinking about what is the best approach for sharing this. Is this policy and advocacy around policy? Is it around toolkits for school systems? So those are some of the questions we're going to be grappling with. And our big outcomes are really just, we want to select one area where we can make an impact together as a group and in each person's individual organization. And maybe we want to build something like a framework or practical tools or an advocacy action plan. So given all of that, I would be open to hearing from you all what you would encourage this group to consider, or what advice you would offer as they begin to work on this particular challenge together, recognizing that it's fairly unformed at the moment. So I'll open it up if you want to just unmute or drop in the chat, however you feel most comfortable, but would love to hear some of your feedback, and I'll be taking notes as you share. And if you have any questions for me as well, I'd be happy to answer those. What advice would you offer to this group as they start on this work, particularly around the shortage, retention? Very good wait time.
I'll start.
Great, thank you. I appreciate it.
I'll be brave.
There's always that like brave person.
Well, I guess I like the way that you've kind of set forth the questions for your work group, and I do think we have, and I'm in the very large collective we, in that we have talked about this a lot. Recruitment and retention is an issue that, of course, is not only impacting the Commonwealth of Kentucky, but nationally, many states are grappling with this issue. And I think it is smart for us to try and identify one particular piece that we would like to be able to see evidence of success at the conclusion. And I don't know exactly what that is. I would also share with you that across the board, I think we have lots of data and information available that would assist this work group in trying to zero in on that one thing that we're trying to address. The Kentucky Board of Education met last week, and we shared the results of the impact survey, which is a survey done of our local school districts, teachers, administrators. It is anonymous, and it basically tries to get to the culture and what our teachers and administrators think is going on in our local school districts. Some of that goes to recruitment and retention. I was very surprised to learn through that survey, and of course, and the presentation done at our board meeting, which we can share. Yes, we have to, on the retention side, we have to make sure that we are keeping those teachers engaged and making a workplace that teachers want to be there and see the value in them being there. But one thing that surprised me was we saw lower positive survey results from our group of teachers in the 5 to 10 year space. So that was a little surprising to me. But if you think about the practical nature of that, as we get new teachers in the door, we are really focusing on keeping them, because the data shows in those early years, that is when we are most likely to lose our teachers. And then if you think about it, the more veteran teachers have kind of been there, done that. They've earned their stripes. And so maybe we're a little less likely in our districts to go to them to do all the extra things that really need to be done to support the early teachers, and maybe the extracurricular things that really make for the whole child in a positive environment from our school systems. But it did surprise me a little bit. So, as this work group considers what is the one thing that we can impact, and I think that's a smart way to approach it that will yield results. I would encourage us to look at data like the impact survey that might help you all narrow down to a particular path that you may go. And we have, of course, lots of other things that are available here, but I just share that because it's very recent, it's fresh on my mind, and we reported it out to the Kentucky Board of Education last week.
Oh, that's fantastic. I really appreciate that. And I've already started to prep the session notes for this particular session, and we have some data, but I'll be sure to look at that impact data as well. And what I hear you saying that I really appreciate is, there are this idea of one thing, right? Like we can focus on one particular area. We could focus on one particular group of teachers, right? Whether it's the 5 to 10 year teachers. There is so much time and dedication paid towards new teachers that sometimes those more veteran teachers are not, we're not hearing from them as much. So I really appreciate this idea. And so we'll be coming back to you all, I imagine, at some point saying, this is where we're going to focus. This is where we think we can have the best impact and influence, given who we are as a group.
All right, Danielle, I hate to call time, but we've got to move on to the next group. Time just is flying by. So
Thank
we're
you
going
so much.
to have to pitch the ball now to the P20 group. And I'll go ahead and share the screen. We're going to start with let's see here, Jana and Melissa and Crystal and Sarah to kind of kick us off, and then I think they'll tell a little bit about their discrete groups as well.
All
Perfect. Thank you, Robin. I'll kick us off. So I'm Crystal Rowland. I'm the Director of Program Standards at the Kentucky Department of Education, and I'm so excited to be working on this work group. So we have in Kentucky Portrait of a Learner, which really looks at those competencies for kindergarten through grade 12 of essential skills that we know are so important for our students to be successful in life and also successful beyond grade 12. Within post-secondary, they also have the Kentucky Graduate Profile, which indicates 6 key essential skills that are what they have heard from industry as well as from post-secondary as being so critical for our college graduates to have when they enter into the workforce and into life. And so we have these 2 beautiful initiatives at K-12 and post-secondary, and really there is such power in being able to align them across the continuum from P through grade 20 to really share with stakeholders and show that continuous pathway of success for our students across the continuum of education. And so one of the challenges is we have 6 competencies in our profile of a learner, and there are 10 key essential skills for our Kentucky Graduate Profile. And so that's one of the lifts on this working group, is looking at how we can align those to show that we are providing great value in our education system in Kentucky, all the way from P through grade 20. And so I'm going to go ahead and kick it over to Sarah Snipes to give us a little bit of background on that Portrait of a Learner.
Thanks, Crystal. I'm Sarah Snipes. I'm the program manager at the Kentucky Department of Education's Division of Innovative Learning. And we have been on this journey for a little while now to a place where we have a state adopted model set of competencies. And then we also have around 117 districts at the local level who are having those conversations with their communities and forming their own sets of local competencies. And so really what you see here is kind of a map of our K-12 journey to date. Back in 2017 and 18, this work kind of got its start, its tiny roots in a group within our Innovative Learning Network that launched the anchor competencies that are now largely reflected in our state set. As mentioned on the call earlier, that really has led us to a space where we've gone out and largely listened to stakeholders across Kentucky that has now yielded these 3 big ideas within our state vision for the future of K-12 education around those vibrant learning experiences, innovation, especially in assessment and community collaboration. And so as we launch these local laboratories of learning, or communities who are deeply invested in continuing the work of local assessment and accountability design, we started to see that a prominent and emerging trend were these local portraits of a learner. And so in response, our Kentucky Board of Education did adopt a set of model competencies grounded back in that original competency education and assessment consortium's efforts. So we continue these conversations today, but a lot of groundwork has been laid for us in that K-12 space. Just moving quickly through the next slide. Wanted to share with you an example of what we're talking about here, which does set us a little apart from the post-secondary efforts today, but I think it's a great challenge for us to work through. So as I mentioned, we have one set of state model competencies that is inspiring the work of local communities. So you'll see here just LaRue County School learner profile, for example, and the skills and competencies that their community found are unique within their context and that they value within that community. And just one more slide here from us in K-12. I wanted to reference a partnership that we have in a lot of these efforts with the University of Kentucky Center for Next Generation Leadership. I want to credit this resource to them, but it's something that we have been referencing often. And this is kind of the journey that we're on specific to Portrait of a Learner, looking at resources to help districts right now get to a place where they develop and co-create with their community a set of local competencies and eventually get them to a space where it's impacting instructional design and performance assessment systems that lead us to a more fully functioning instruction and assessment system based on competencies. So kick it over to Jana and Melissa to hear a little bit about the progress in post-secondary.
Thank you so much, Sarah, and good afternoon, everyone. I am Melissa Bell. I'm the Vice President of Academic Excellence and Student Success at the Council. And as this work progresses, you'll hear more from me, but today my main role is to introduce to you Jana Weiss. Jana has had a distinguished career in higher education, including being the provost of Eastern Kentucky University. And we are very lucky to have her here at CPE to lead up our graduate profile efforts. And with that, Jana, I will let you take it from here and tell them about our graduate profile efforts.
Well, thank you, Melissa. This is really a privilege. You know, was a certified teacher in Kentucky. Initially, my career has been on a college campus, but I did have the opportunity to serve on the Kentucky Board of Education several years ago. So I really value this opportunity that we have to, I think what could be a watershed moment for Kentucky, that we could align these two sets of skills. So Robin, I have some animation if you want to. So Dr. Thompson mentioned a minute ago that we value measurement in Kentucky, and we have made such progress, as he mentioned, with the completion agenda, numbers that can be counted. Well, Dr. Thompson, Dr. Bell also wanted to add a quality metric. How we know we have quality in Kentucky higher education, but how do we really measure it? Quality sometimes is more difficult to measure. So this year, this current strategic statewide agenda now has a quality metric. And it says this, that we will work with campuses to ensure the essential competencies and outcomes are embedded in all academic programs. And the program around this we call the Kentucky Graduate Profile. So how do we do this? Where do we start? Well, if we're going to embed competencies and try to assess them, we need to know what those are. And we have 10 essential skills, as Crystal mentioned. These skills were identified by Vice President Bell as she worked with the provost, and also they're nationally aligned with AACNU, with NACE for the cooperative education assessment, for the Lumen grant profile of the essential qualities for employability. So we're really confident with these skills, and sometimes employers call them essentials or soft skills. We call them essential skills. I like the term that we saw on the slide earlier, the 21st century skills. Primarily, these are transferable skills. It doesn't matter the major that a student enters college, they're going to need to learn these skills just like we all continue with them. Well, then that brings a question, how do we know what these skills are? So let's take teamwork, for example. We have a definition for this, but we also are going to need to identify behaviors. How do we know what teamwork looks like? And interestingly enough, as we even speak today, there are groups of teachers, faculty, groups of employers working with them. We have a work group for each of these 10 essential skills, identifying what they should look like in a classroom and what they should look like in an assignment. And then from that, working with the organization is CBN, the Competency-Based Education Network. They will help us with assignments that faculty can use, and assessments that they can use where we can actually measure quality. Well, how do we do this, though, in 24 campuses across the state? Well, we have a vehicle, if you will, called the Kentucky Graduate Profile Academy. And this academy has all 24 public Kentucky institutions. We have the 4-year institutions, all 8, the 2 research institutions and 6 regional universities, and then all 16 community colleges. And we are so grateful for these leadership teams on each campus that have taken on the leadership role, their voices of influence that are selected by the provost. And we are seeing a lot of movement. And that's why I like this emblem, because it does show movement. But what are we really wanting to do? There are 3 very important criteria for these 10 essential skills. First, we have to provide high quality for every Kentucky graduate. We need to keep our promise to students who show up on our campuses. Also, it has to be relevant. To maintain a student and engage a student, they have to see relevance in their curriculum. And it also has to be equitable. And I believe there's a lot of evidence that shows that unless the requirements are in the curriculum, it can't be equitable even with all the wraparound support services that we provide for students. So students can't opt out of curriculum requirements, but also curriculum requirements really take the buy-in of the faculty. And that's where the academy teams come in to work together to transform these education outcomes in Kentucky. So I think with that, we have looked at the profile of a learner and the graduate profile. And Crystal, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you. So we took a look at just what each of those competencies are, but our guiding question is, how can we collectively develop a seamless transition pathway from K-12 education through post-secondary to ensure that Kentucky learners graduate with the essential competencies and skills needed for success in the workforce and in life? And so what we're proposing our outcomes to be would be looking at strategic resources that would align the outcomes for the P12 competencies with the post-secondary essential skills that would be shared with stakeholders to ensure student success and enhance the value of Kentucky's education system. So we could see the value of, students understanding how these competencies progress across the P20 continuum, as well as parents and educators and other organizations across the state. Are there any thoughts or questions that, oh, it looks like everybody's coming back to us. To say if there's any feedback for the working group on things that you would like to see included as outcomes.
I always like to see how this breaks down in terms of our groups. How much are accommodations put into play in, a portrait of a learner, a portrait of a graduate, whatever we want to call it. We have expectations for all students, but how do we adjust it to those that we know are going to have challenges meeting these requirements?
That's an excellent point.
Well, I think that's a great question. And I think that's why faculty buy-in is so important, that faculty are reminded that our goal is to help every student have a successful education career, and that they're prepared that, right now employers say there's a great gap between what students are graduating with skills and the expectations of the employers. And so that's really one main goal. And adapting the curriculum so that students get, every student, not just the students who volunteer, but every student gets an opportunity to demonstrate their abilities, and they can articulate them for employers. And right now, we don't have good data showing that that's the case nationwide, not just Kentucky.
Absolutely.
Jana, I don't know if people can see, but there are a couple of comments in the chat. Sometimes when you're a presenter, you can't see the chat. So would you like me to read those to kind of help?
Sure. I just admit when I'm doing face-to-face or in person, I really can't follow the chat. So if you want to do that,
it's hard.
See what they said.
I agree with that. So there's one comment that said, I would love to see this group help identify the policy barriers and reforms needed to align the policy environment to this work. In partnership with the Cool Council, out of KDE, we can start a grassroots movement to prepare for upcoming sessions over the next several years to make this alignment and coherence a reality, to support this work from aspirational to design, creation, and implementation. So that was a comment from Dr. Flynn. And then a follow-up question from Dr. Flynn. Do we have an asset audit to show what policy systems and processes are in place or needed to support this work?
Those are good questions. I'm not sure, Sarah, if you have some background with the work that has happened with the Cool Council, because I know that they have subcommittees that do look at things such as policy and making recommendations to sort of set the conditions for this work to be successful in Kentucky.
Right, Crystal. I'd say that's really an ongoing effort. One of our most recent resources developed with partners through KnowledgeWorks in our K-12 space did take a look across the existing policy landscape. One of the action areas within an innovation guide for K-12 education spaces was a portrait of a learner. And so gives some folks some on-ramps to think about how to use existing policy flexibilities to really act on what we can already do within that space around portrait of a learner. So that's a great idea. And I'm making note of that here for our work group as well to continue pushing in that space.
Any last questions for the competency group? Robin, thank you for bringing the question from the chat. Appreciate that. Okay. Well, as you can tell, we're needing a little extra time in our breakouts. And so that's why the people came back and now they've gone back to the other room. So I apologize for any confusion there. But we do have Cassie Benedict and Wendy Kane with us now who can discuss affordability of post-secondary education and the work with their work group. So if there are any other questions for the competency framework?
I would just add that I think the support of this group is particularly critical. And I know that we at CPE are really looking forward to the work ahead.
Thank you, Jana. Okay. So if there aren't any other questions, Cassie and Wendy will turn things over to you.
Okay. Robin, would you be able to share our part of the presentation?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, and I'll go ahead and get started. I know Cassie's kind of in and out some right now, but she can jump on when she's able to. Thank you again for, there she is. Thank you again for allowing us this opportunity to work on this committee. We're very excited to see where this is going to take us and what we can do for the future with this committee. So we'll start by saying we haven't got to have our meeting with our group yet. It's been a very challenging few weeks with all of the FAFSA changes that have been rolling out daily for the two of us. So we are setting our first meeting for May 8th. And hopefully things will calm down a little bit with the Department of Education. We're hopeful for that. The first thing is Cassie and I kind of got together and brainstormed about some of the larger challenges that we both see in our interactions with students on a day-to-day basis. And a couple of the things that I see on a day-to-day basis are just the general education on the FAFSA and what the FAFSA covers. There's the assumption from a lot of times from families that if they file the FAFSA and complete that they've done everything they need to cover their education with a college, which is simply not true. But there is that perception a lot of times now. And then the other thing is just students, teaching them how many scholarships are out there and available, and educating them on how to complete scholarship applications, and really trying to get them to start on these things earlier. Sometimes when you actually start meeting with seniors, their senior years, some of those really large competitive scholarships are already closed or are going to close within a few days. So you're in a rushed position. So really having these conversations, we've worked together to kind of come up with some recommendations and a strategic plan on what we think we can do to work towards that goal of educating our students. So I'll turn that over to Cassie if you want to add anything to that.
I think you did a great job. Do you want me to go into the recommendations like last time? Okay. So again, our disclaimer is that this is just me and Wendy putting our heads together at this point. We still haven't met with our committee, but one of the things that we really thought was a good idea is a more focused universal approach to education and support surrounding affordability, specifically in the scholarship category, in FAFSA kind of functionality, and then also cost analysis. And so I don't think whoever switching the slides, can somebody switch the slides? I don't know who my assistant is. Okay. And so one of our thought processes was to create a 7-year strategic plan where we start in the junior year of high school. And this is all in addition to the already robust offerings that KIA offers in terms of the education and the support that we offer around financial aid and preparing for college and filing your FAFSA and all of that stuff. This is kind of some areas that we saw where we could grow in the state of Kentucky. Please forgive me if you haven't heard the news. My babysitter is on vacation and my kids are all around. There's like a whole lot of them. Okay, go take a bath or a shower. Sorry. So junior year, okay, go for it. We wanted to be sure that we were working with students to understand the importance of gift aid, scholarship, and how it's earned and acquired, kind of that education portion. Senior year, then you'll need to wait till I'm finished. Senior year, we were wanting to give very hands-on help early in the senior year to help students understand how to apply for scholarships, how to write a scholarship essay, how to write a college resume, and then really just the logistics of it, which can be a barrier in terms of concerted time. This is your time. This is your opportunity to fill out scholarships and having that internet access. And so even the logistics we want to kind of work through. Some of the guidance and clarity that we wanted to provide on the FAFSA, Wendy said something that really resonated with me when she said, students think they can file the FAFSA and then their college will just be paid for. And I kind of had a light bulb moment and I was like, you're right. Like the message is file your FAFSA, go to college, file your FAFSA, get money. And you all know as well as Wendy and I know that there's a lot of students and families who aren't eligible, who don't qualify for money. And even with loans, there's a limit. And so, they can't even just borrow to pay for their college education. And so one of the things that we think is important is for families to know eligibility limits, loan limits, and how aid functions in terms of what's paid back, what's not, and that what is paid back when and how it's paid back. And then also, no, you're okay. Also, early cost analysis so that when parents start the conversation with their students to talk about where do we want to go, what's match, what colleges match, what colleges fit, that we put cost analysis in that conversation and not just how much does it cost, but if you have to borrow loans to attend this college, if this is your degree and this is your career path, can your career path and salary support your loan payments when you graduate? Perfect timing. The committee plans to put together a 7-year strategic plan. And so again, it would be junior year scholarship education and cost analysis education. Senior year would be the actual scholarship support, FAFSA support, and college analysis discussions. The college years, we would just be there for continued support, loan repayment education, continued borrowing guidance in terms of, I know that it's easy to go in and get more loans when you're just a college student and you need some money for gas to get home. And so continued support through borrowing. And then first year postgraduate would be loan repayment support, and if applicable, public service loan forgiveness applications and all of those things. And so our hope, and this kind of came out of nowhere when I was presenting last time, because I had this idea and then I was like, I haven't even talked to Wendy about this. But my thinking is, if we go to our committee in April or in May and we begin the conversation, what I would love to see with this 7-year strategic plan is actually some pilot programs, some pilot students. And then the last group, they had a great idea to use maybe like the Everybody Counts schools or the Everybody Counts students to be our pilot students to actually do the strategic plan with, so that we can gauge those outcomes and see, did the students get more scholarship dollars? Did they borrow fewer loan dollars? Are they more conscious of what's happening with cost and loans than the average student? Are their outcomes better in terms of what they owe when they graduate? And so that may be one of the goals that we have as a committee or as a work group, is to put together kind of a strategic plan, and then additionally a pilot group that we could pilot the plan with. Sorry about my assistant.
Thanks, Cassie and Wendy. Does anybody have questions for the affordability group? We're going to try to get one more here from advising here in just a second. We're just really racing the clock. Jenny, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I guess my experience, and I work deeply with scholarships every single day, is that I really think junior year is too late. So many of our scholarships across the state at the public universities are based on grades. And if you don't start talking to students about grades and scholarship opportunities in their sophomore year, they really, I do not believe, have adequate amount of time to really make any type of change in behavior or impact their grades. And so I just, that would be my initial reaction to the recommendations, is that junior year is too late.
I think that's a great point, Jenny. And that is something that we discussed in the last group as well. And so one of our thoughts is that Kia already offers, in underclassmen years, some education and support around these types of things. So this would be more like wheels to the road, kind of actually sitting with these students, creating their scholarship essays, creating their college resumes and things like that, where, on the forefront, we can't do that with every single student in Kentucky, but with this pilot program, at least maybe we can create some supports to get those wheels to the road. And so, but one thing that, we've now heard this a couple of times. So one thing that Wendy and I may discuss with our committee is, if we are doing kind of a 7-year strategic plan, maybe we start it sooner. Maybe it's a longer plan than that, or maybe it's a growth area. Maybe we start out with a 7-year strategic plan, and in the coming years, we see that it's successful. We see that it's doing well. Then we grow to begin at 9th grade year or something like that. It's a really good comment. I appreciate that.
And the same for like resume building and things. We usually recommend that junior summer is a good time for students to do that, because once senior year starts, there are so many activities. A lot of seniors that are eligible for competitive scholarships are in multiple dual credit classes, AP classes. They're in leadership roles in their high schools. And that spring of junior year and junior summer is when a lot of students, if maybe they've initially applied to Governor Scholars or things of that nature, they're starting to really put together, like, what have I done during my first 3 years of high school? What is my service, my awards, my leadership opportunities, and things like that. So I think that could be pushed back just a little bit too. And I think students have time in junior summer maybe to do college visits, and we kind of kick things off with spring break of junior year, like do visits. And so they're starting to learn about what those opportunities are and things that might be. And then the last comment would just be about, how we get more students to complete the FAFSA. And one of the things, as more of the public universities of Kentucky are shifting money from merit-based aid to need-based aid, I do think, because there's been such a direct like break between merit-based aid and need-based aid really actually being for low income. Many of the universities have rolled out some institutional aid programs that are really for more middle income type of families. And so to really stress that you don't just need to fill out the FAFSA if you're a low income family, that in order to be considered for all types of aid, you need to fill out the FAFSA.
Great feedback, Jenny. Totally agree.
All right. I hate to move this train along, but we've got to do that. We've got one more group we're going to hear from today. And the other group may come back while we're listening to launch. I hope that they're able to, or to the advising. But we're ready to hear now. Thank you, Cassie and Wendy. We're ready to hear now from Mitzi and Kelly about the post-secondary advising work group. And they're going to share some of the work that's already going on, and then the plans that they have for the group. So are you ready for me to go ahead and share, Mitzi or Kelly, or do you want to say something?
We Amanda had mentioned us doing a whole group, so I didn't know if you wanted to check with her. We didn't present in the last breakout because we ran out of time, so we're happy to do either.
We can said for us to go ahead and get started, and then if they may wrap up and be able to join us at some point. So if they come into the room, just keep going, okay? And they can hear what they hear when they get here.
That is perfect. So yes, please go ahead and share your screen with our slides. So good afternoon, everybody. And just want to give you a little bit of background information about me and where I come from. My name is Mitzi Holland, and I'm the director of the Kentucky Advising Academy. And the Kentucky Advising Academy was actually created based on your all's recommendation to prioritize advising across the state. So thank you for that. The Kentucky Advising Academy works to support educators as they support students in their post-secondary journey. And we want to do that by connecting them to resources and opportunities that will assist them in supporting those students. Kelly?
Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. I'm Kelly Norman. I'm a senior fellow at the Council on Post-Secondary Education, and I lead the Launch Equitable and Accelerated Pathways for All initiative. And I'll discuss the Launch initiative a little more in depth in just a few minutes. But for context, there are 4 key areas that Launch focuses on, and those are credentials of value, seamless transitions between K-12, post-secondary, and the workforce, work-based learning, and advising and student supports. And in each of those areas, there are already work groups that are established that meet and discuss the current state that Kentucky is in regards to each of those 4 areas. And the goal is to create a strategic action plan for advancing career pathways, as well as increasing equity and access to those 4 areas for students in both secondary and post-secondary schools.
And so we were asked to lead the CEC advising work group, and we're happy to be a part of this work. And in forming the CEC advising work group, we wanted to make sure that we were leveraging folks that were already doing great work in advancing post-secondary advising throughout the state. So we wanted to make sure that we tapped into the people that were serving as part of the Launch advising work group, as well as educators who were key partners with the work that the Kentucky Advising Academy is already doing. And as you all mentioned and discussed and talked about the challenge of advising, we realized that students across the Commonwealth should have access to high quality and individualized advising to make informed decisions about college and career options. But we also know that advising capacity is inconsistent across the state, especially when it comes to low income and rural communities. So as we look at this challenge, we want to think about and look at how can we leverage work that's already being done with the Kentucky Advising Academy and in collaboration with the work that's being done with the Launch initiatives, advising and student support work groups to strengthen equitable post-secondary advising. So that's kind of where we're looking at as our challenge, making sure that we do provide equitable post-secondary advising for all students.
So our work groups have, they've been meeting, they actually started meeting last summer. Now we have had, we had an established work group, and of course, as we went through, that work group has evolved and changed, and so there are actually several of your agencies and organizations that are represented in at least one of the launch groups, several of them in the advising work group as well. But as we go forward, we are really looking at the three really key questions for the work that we're going to be doing. And the first one is, how can state level partners build awareness and buy-in among school and district stakeholders around post-secondary advising? Because as you all know, if we don't have that buy-in, it's not going to go anywhere. What supports and resources do advisors need to implement post-secondary advising and implement it with fidelity? And what policies could be implemented or revised to improve the quality and accessibility of post-secondary advising? And I know on the screen, you'll see there's also a fourth one talking about the post-secondary advising framework, but we really hedge that into that second guiding question revolving around supports and resources. So Mitzi will talk a little bit about the post-secondary advising framework soon, but it's also it kind of goes in with that second one.
And in looking at outcomes for this work, we are going to be seeking, and we have started seeking, recommendations on leveraging and elevating the existing resources that are already being developed and utilized, such as the post-secondary advising toolkit, the post-secondary advising framework. Kentucky Advising Academy has partnered with several people to develop those resources. We have webinars, and we're in the process of developing a digital learning library. So we want to talk about how can we leverage and elevate those resources and look for what else is missing to support advisors in post-secondary advising. Kelly, do you want to talk about the strategic plan outcome?
Yes. So as I previously mentioned, one of the deliverables for the launch initiative is to create a strategic action plan for increasing access and equity to advising and student supports. So once that's developed, that action plan will be pretty specific with objectives and action items to achieve our priorities and our goals, but it will also include metrics and data as well to get a really holistic look at where post-secondary advising is at the current time and then where it will be, hopefully. And so we can measure that growth and change. Okay, thank you, Robin. So just to give a little overview of Launch, Launch is a national college and career pathway initiative that Kentucky joined in January 2023. So we kind of eased into it a little over a year ago and really started hitting it hard over last summer and early fall. So the goal of Launch is to increase equity and access in career pathways, leading to success and ultimately for all adult Kentuckians to have a family-sustaining, wage-earning career. We can only do that if we remove barriers that underserved populations have, along with expanding our career pathway options for all students. Robin, we go to the next slide, please. Thank you. As previously mentioned, we are doing this through the lens of 4 key areas: credentials of value, seamless transitions, advising and student supports, and work-based learning. Each of the work groups has a really robust group of partners, including various state agencies, local school districts, business and industry, and post-secondary representatives that work in those work groups. We've completed a needs assessment for the levers of equity, funding, policy, data, and partnerships in each of those areas. And we have kind of finished doing the analysis part for credentials of value and seamless transitions. And we currently have a strategic plan in place for those 2 areas. And that work will begin for implementation of our strategic plan for those 2 areas in the next few months. And we are currently working on analyzing our needs and developing those priority goals for advising and work-based learning as well. And we'll have a strategic plan in place and ready for implementation starting in late fall of 2024. No, Mitzi, over to you.
Okay, so mentioned earlier that we have some resources that are already being utilized to help support post-secondary advising and increase equitable post-secondary advising throughout the state. So the Kentucky Advising Academy has been working really hard to connect counselors and those serving in advising roles to the resources and opportunities. And over the past 2 years, we've been able to facilitate about 64 professional learning opportunities, both in person and virtual, at conferences, including webinars and podcasts. So one of the resources that we are really trying to put a lot of focus on is the post-secondary advising toolkit. And this toolkit was developed in collaboration or partnership with the Education Strategy Group. And we're using lots of reputable post-secondary advising resources from a lot of great partners, KDE, Kia, National College Attainment Network, and Gear Up Kentucky, many more. Just want to point out just some of the key features for counselors on this toolkit. We do archive past webinars and podcasts. We have Start Here guides for counselors that are trying to support students in various post-secondary advising topics. It gives them a starting point for navigating that particular topic with their student. We have one-page PDFs that can be printed and given to students, parents, families that cover a variety of post-secondary advising topics, from match and fit and scholarships to understanding your financial aid award letter. Again, these are not resources that we created, but we compiled or curated based on the great resources that are available through Kia, KDE, and combined it into a one-stop shop for advisors. We're in the process of adding a digital learning library that will be short videos that support counselors and advisors as they are working through various post-secondary advising topics. And we also are going to house our post-secondary advising framework, and it's actually already linked to the toolkit. So Robin, if you'll go to the next slide, I'm going to give you a quick overview. And I know that this is kind of a down and dirty version, but we have a lot of information that we want to share, and I'm trying to do it quickly. Our post-secondary advising framework was developed to kind of serve as a roadmap for counselors. And it was designed to show alignment really in grades 6 through 12 of the major milestones and activities that kids should or students should be exposed to as they move through middle school and high school to advance their transition to their post-secondary path. And as we created this framework, we were sure to bring in people from district level, middle school, high school. We had ATC representation. We had post-secondary institution representation, as well as feedback and representation from lots of state level partners, KDE, OCTE, Kia, the Kentucky School Counselor Association, and Gear Up. And I know I'm leaving people off, but my point is that this was not something that KAA just came up with. It was something that we really put together with a lot of key partners. There are 4 main categories: career exploration, post-secondary opportunities, financial aid and literacy, and essential skills. And I want to point out that this framework is aligned to the ILP, and it's aligned to career studies standards. So a lot of thought and feedback put into developing this. And our goal and hope is that as we move the work forward with the CEC advising work group, that we will be able to get feedback from those partners on how this framework and toolkit can be elevated, and also feedback on what's missing, like what is needed to help with equitable advising that we are missing out on. And you all, I could talk forever about this stuff, but I know that we're kind of on a time crunch. I do welcome you, if anybody has questions or comments or wants more information, to email me. I'm happy to answer, and I'm sure Kelly is the same.
Thank you, Mitzi, and everyone. This was like a crazy blitz on the 4 work groups. You can tell they're not surface level and they're not rubber stamp. It's hard work, deep work that's really kicking off and moving. I will definitely add this PowerPoint slide deck and the contacts for the co-leads email. If you have feedback, there's so much great conversation today. I'm sorry we've had to mess with it, and then my teleporting skills are not great, so I apologize for that. But we are gonna, and for the sake of time, we're gonna move on, but you will get this and you will absolutely have input on the work of the work group. So I'm excited about this work, and the co-leads are gonna be phenomenal if you all have not figured that out already. So now I'm actually gonna turn it over to Matt for about 10 minutes. Matt, if that's okay, if you need a little more time, you could take it. But we've been talking about these success measures for a while. And so Matt agreed just to kind of lead a brief discussion to get your feedback. So be ready to weigh in on your thoughts. And Matt, I'm going to turn it to you to facilitate this part.
Thanks, Amanda. Thanks for my adjusted time cue there too. That was very subtle of you, but I'll call it out anyway. And thanks for everybody that was leading the work groups. I found that really fascinating. I appreciate it. So as Amanda said, I'm here to sort of represent the data group that has been meeting for several months, discussing measures of success. I think I saw both Dee Connor from KDE and Travis Muncie from CPE on the call earlier. And then we also have Alicia Crouch, who I'm not sure if I saw her or not from KC. Oh, there you are, Alicia. Hi, from KCTCS. Along with Amanda and Robin from CPE, who are our fearless leaders. We've been really meeting for several months trying to figure out, broadly how we can fully use data to inform the work of the CEC, all of our work. So the first thing I want to mention is, when I know that probably most folks on this call, and I should say too, in case there are some that I don't know, I'm the executive director of the Kentucky Center for Statistics, or KY Stats. You're probably used to me referring to data from the KY Stats perspective, and certainly that's a big part of what we're talking about. But when I'm discussing this in this context, it's really the broader continuum context. And then, I'm sort of bringing the message from our collaborative group as well. So it's not just a KY Stats conversation that I'm trying to have with you all here today. I just want to be clear about that. Although I hope we can continue to play a big role. So really what I want to do is part update. You'll notice I have no dashboard, no spreadsheet, no PowerPoint, which is also a rarity for me, but really I want to just kind of provide part update, part conversation starter. So, and I'm probably down to 8 of my 10 minutes, so I'll get into it. If I think about kind of what our data group has worked on, what we've tried to address, I think of it in sort of 3 parts to date. First, we really started with, and this is where I think we do a great job in the state of Kentucky. I'm not from here originally. I don't know where the love affair in our state with data started, but it's strong and it makes my job fun and I appreciate it. But we started where we often do in this state, which is what data do we have that can inform the work of the continuum. And so, I mean, I even as I was listening to those 4 great presentations, I see that threaded throughout. We, as the data group, have, I think, brought information and data to us. And if you think about, Amanda, I know at least twice has presented the KY Stats product, where if you think the life outcomes product, think about the little stick figures and with 2015 Kentucky public high school graduates, and we went through the continuum of the numbers and percentages of those students where they've ended up over time. I think that's a good example of sort of that first phase is what do we have that can inform the work. This is the update part, by the way. So where I think we have moved, and I briefly got to speak to you about this at one of our recent meetings, where we started to move to was the second phase, which is kind of what else exists that we can leverage to inform our work. So that doesn't mean what else is already pre-made. It just means what other data do we think might be relevant and available to us that we could help. That's where that dashboard conversation came from. If you all remember last time, I gave a brief update about the the work with the continuum. The work of the data group, that's where the dashboard update or conversation came from. I'm going to talk a little bit more in depth about that briefly. The third bucket, which is what we've been talking about recently in our group, is what I want to start the conversation with. So I'll kind of hold that, just put a pin and know that there's a sort of third bucket of conversation. So again, we started with what we have, moved into what else we can do. We have been discussing in our data group this idea of how can we repackage or reuse the data that we have into a dashboard that we could look at as a continuum to understand some of the key data points and metrics across this entire continuum. And so just briefly as a refresher, we have actually done some work on identifying availability of metrics, timing of collection, relevant key metrics in sort of these big buckets across the continuum: early childhood, high school transitions, and K-12, early post-secondary opportunities, post-secondary transitions, first-year college success, educator workforce, and adult learners and post-secondary attainment and workforce. So that's a big, broad swath of what I think we're looking at. The last time I talked to you, we had sort of identified those buckets. As I said, we've done work on identifying what metrics are available, who is the owner, and how we might access those, timing, et cetera. What we have discussed is a dashboard can be really helpful. It can ground us in some of the data across that continuum. I think all of us are looking at data at certain points in that continuum, probably not often or always across the entirety. So I think there's real value there. But that's where that conversation has led us into what we want to start a conversation with you all is that also is a limited approach, right? And so, I want to be really, really clear about what I'm saying and not saying here. KY Stats does a lot of dashboard creation. And I'm actually going to recommend to this group, I think we should create a dashboard just like what I'm describing. I think it has value. But what we want to discuss is the value there is of a certain type, and it's in some ways limited. Not that it's not good and helpful, but that it takes us only so far. And there are a couple of reasons for that. One is, obviously, we as the collective don't have access to all data all the time. But really the primary driver of what we have been talking about as a limitation is the data that we can present if we go through traditional means is pretty lagged. So not only are the indicators themselves lagging, meaning if we care about an intervention in high school, we don't really, and it's focused on post-secondary access, we don't really know for a while whether or not it quote unquote worked or the degree to which it worked until we have enrollment numbers, right? If that's what it's focused on, post-secondary enrollment numbers. We also have a lag in terms of data collection. And then if we go through sort of the KY Stats route, there's another lag to connect, process, and present those data. So the lag is really what we are, concerned is not the right word, but really what we have been discussing. How can we work together if this group is the group of leaders across the state that is working together on these issues? Can we also have the conversation around working together differently through data or through the use of data? Can we take a closer to real-time approach to look at these data? Is that something that's valuable? Is that something that we can commit to as a group, as a continuum to have conversations about? So just a couple of examples that we've kicked around to sort of ground what I mean. And this is not to pick on anyone because this could be any of our metrics, but kindergarten readiness as an example. We don't really know what the kindergarten readiness rate is. For my daughter who's in kindergarten, we don't know her class until next year when those data are available. Just like we don't, when KY Stats gets KCTCS enrollment data, we get that in a very specific way at a specific time. And KY Stats, as the example here, we don't know what the enrollment numbers look like prior to the census date. And so there's some gaps there in addition to the lag. And so again, I could have gone down that entire dashboard and kind of presented the limitations, and there will always be limitations, but that's okay. I think what we're trying to get to is a conversation around, are there other ways that we can be looking at data in a closer to real-time fashion that is differently than we have done it before? Is that valuable for us? And is that something that you all would like to charge our data group to do? I feel like I kind of threw a lot out there, so I just want to make sure that Travis and Dee Dee, that I haven't, and Alicia, that I haven't missed anything or that I haven't misrepresented anything, because I'm kind of speaking for all of us there, and I don't want to miss anything.
I think you did a great job. This is Dee Dee, and I think what we're looking at is there data that we can make available more timely so that it becomes more actionable, and is this group prepared to understand that the data at that point is draft, and is that something people want to think about or not think about? I think that's part of the conversation that has to be discussed further.
Yeah, Dee Dee, thanks for saying draft. That was a word that I wanted to say and didn't say. I think it's really important. And draft and, when I'm saying different, I think more private or private at that stage, right? So it would really, we're talking about something that would be draft, more timely and really just for this group, for our interpretation and understanding. But that's a different way of looking at our data and using it. Travis and Alicia, did I leave anything else off? Thanks, Dee Dee.
I don't have anything to add, Matt. I think you explained it well.
Matt, I will just say, though, I think it is important for us to have that data, even if it's in draft form. I think the earlier we can start having that kind of conversation as you are finalizing the data, if you will, because fairly often there's not, as Dee Dee and Travis and Matt knows, even in draft forms, fairly often there's not huge macro swings. There's some cleanup stuff, but I think the earlier we can get these data and the earlier we can start talking prescriptively and predictably about those, I think that's where we have to go.
Appreciate that, Dr. Thompson. Anybody else have any trouble? Oh, Jenny, I see your hand up. Hi, Jenny.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to applaud you all for doing this. It's been a frustration of mine for years. And one of the reasons why I sometimes don't go to some of the bigger data sets because it's not more updated data. We just started just distinguishing between enrollment and on our day-to-day reports, we call it registrations. And that's a way of saying, these students are registered. They're not technically considered an enrolled student until we get past a certain census date. And so maybe looking for some ways like that, rather than calling it draft, of ways in which we can use different terminology to show that this is dynamic live data compared day to day, or reports that show us how we're making progress toward end of year data.
Yeah, I love that, Jenny. It's a great idea. Any other ideas, or are there any concerns around this? I also want to be clear. We have some ideas, and that's a great idea, just a specific idea there, Jenny. But I don't want to represent as though we know exactly how we want to go about this differently. But it's something we've been discussing. We wanted to sort of take the temperature of the group and make sure it's something that there's interest and support for. So I think what we should probably do, Amanda, is talk in our group and figure out a plan to move forward a little more tangibly and some check-ins with this group around what this may or may not look like and sort of who's taking the charge, et cetera.
No, I think that's a great idea. Our next convening is August. So that gives us this summer to kind of plug through some possible options, maybe to put before the continuum, maybe early fall, late summer, early fall, as some ideas, and see kind of where we land, if that sounds appropriate.
That's great.
All right. Thank you, Matt, so much for leading that, putting up with me on my time limits. So Robin, I'm going to turn it to you, Robin Kenny. I'm going to turn it to you to hit the highlights of your legislative session, and I'm happy to share the screen if that would be helpful for you.
That would be great. Thank you, Amanda.
Sure thing.
First of all, I want to thank all the people that are on this call and all the people that aren't, that really, when a legislative session rolls around, we all know, those of us in the education space, how interested everyone is in education and the laws that should surround it. I sometimes wonder to myself if people think I went to school, so I should know how to write a law about, how school should work. And it really takes the collective effort of all the experts that are on this call and others to be valued resources to help those legislators as they work on laws that affect education. So a big thanks to everyone that worked during the legislative session from across all of our agencies. I'm going to fly quickly through lots of things that impact the K-12 space, starting with, of course, the budget. At a very high level, we were very thankful again to see the SEEK funding, which is the base funding that comes from the Commonwealth of Kentucky to support local school districts, increase again. Very thankful for that. For those that may not work in this space, SEEK is not the amount of the check that we write per pupil. It is instead sort of this amount that comes from both state and local contributions, almost like a minimum guarantee. So it rose from 4,200 per student to 4,326 in 25 and 4,586 in fiscal year 26. Always good news for everyone when base seat continues to increase. We continue to see in the budget the funding of full day kindergarten. That was actually in a prior budget. We'd really hoped that we'd get it codified into law. But it looks like, once again, it's just going to be in the budget bill language, which is better than not being there at all. And the funding was still there to support it. We also see an increase in additional funding for pupil transportation, which is a requirement of the General Assembly to fund. We're still not quite at 100% of funding of actual costs, but we are each session making progress toward that goal. So good things in transportation for pupil funding. AP and IB exams, we got a little scared during the session because we saw some, this was funding that was already in there before. We saw it kind of fall out and race to give that informed education to legislators so it could come back in. And of course, that helps all of us as we look toward that continuum of education, getting those kids into AP and IB exams and passing those coursework. And then finally, 1.2 million in each fiscal year to support a statewide reading research center. We've had a reading research center for some time now, but we again saw funding kind of fall out for a little bit of the session and then come back in. So, and we're currently going through a request for proposal process to name the next statewide reading research partner that we will utilize. So we look forward to that coming up. Next slide, please. Here's some things that happened on the educator workforce side. So it's really directly linked to the work of the continuum. And most of this really resides in KIA. And so thank you to our partners at KIA that continue to support the efforts of scholarship programs. We see a new student teacher stipend program this time that we hope will encourage those students that are thinking about being teachers, and this will help defray some of the costs that they have in going through the student teaching process and giving them $5,000 for each student completing the certification requirement. And then the teacher recruitment student loan forgiveness pilot program, there's some funding for that. You'll see at the top of this slide, once again, through lots of efforts of lots of people wanting to have the General Assembly really dedicate some funding to provide certified and classified staff a salary or a compensation increase. The best that we got this time, which is similar to the last time, is an encouragement in that direction. And sort of the thinking by the General Assembly on this topic was that they have increased SEEK and other areas of funding, which then would allow school districts to make that local decision about how much of an increase that they would offer to their certified and classified staff. We continue to see, concerns, especially across all of our staff that work in local school districts about the amount of compensation and salaries. But certainly there's been a lot of discussion about sort of the movement across the nation, and also especially with our surrounding states and how they are starting to tackle the entry level of teacher pay, and then how that affects the compression of salaries across all their salary schedules. So we're going to continue to support and advocate for additional funding for both certified and classified staff, because that directly goes to recruitment and retention issues that this continuum is interested in. Next slide, please. There's also Senate Bill 265 established a new teacher induction and mentoring program. For some of you that have been around for a while, you might remember KTIP, the Kentucky Teacher Induction Program. And that is still kind of on the books, but there's encouragement for a new teacher induction and mentor program. The Educational Professional Standards Board will be charged with issuing some guidance on that. The bad news is there's no money for it. So, I think it will be guidance. It won't be mandated. Nobody, you can do it if you want. I'm also very encouraged because we have a lot of our local school districts that already still have teacher induction programs and mentoring programs. they see the value of having those supports for their early entry teachers. And so we were really hoping that we could get additional money associated to kind of support that. And we'll keep going back and advocating for that as well. House Bill 300 was a pretty, I think the goal of House Bill 300 was to establish the EPSB complaint response timelines. And when I say that, some concerns by people that the process didn't move fast enough for those certificate holders when a complaint is filed against them. I continue to remind people that when a complaint is filed, nothing happens to a teacher's certificate until it is resolved. But there are some pretty aggressive timelines built into House Bill 300, and the Kentucky Department of Education and the Educational Professional Standards Board will be recommending a veto to the governor of this, primarily associated with the aggressiveness of the timelines that have to be met. We just think that there could be some bad unintended consequences as a result of this, where thorough investigations are not completed before a 30-day window that EPSB needs to act upon a complaint. So stay tuned on that one. Next slide, please. Some other bills that might be of interest. We see for the first time House Bill 695, which is encouraging an adaptive kindergarten readiness pilot, focusing on preschool children and trying to get them kindergarten ready. It will be a technology-based type of pilot that will work. An outside vendor will work with us and toward making sure that we expose these kids to maybe something that they're not exposed to right now through the use of technology. We always think it's better to have a certified classroom teacher that's helping our preschoolers. But this is something that we're going to give a try and see what kind of results we get out of it. And then House Bill 162, the Kentucky Numeracy Counts Act, for those of you that might have been keeping with the early literacy space in prior sessions. Read to Succeed, which really focused on our early learners and getting them lots of supports from a literacy perspective. This is sort of the companion version in the numeracy space. Representative Tipton sponsored both Read to Succeed earlier, and now the Kentucky Numeracy Counts Act, $5 million in each year to kind of start that initiative. So we're looking forward to working on that with again, our school districts. Next slide, please. A couple of areas in the student support, school safety, health and wellness area, Senate Bill 2. It actually did two things. The front part of the bill, I would say, really built on continuing to support our students, our trauma-informed teams, again, focusing on social, emotional, mental health of our students. KDE weighed in on that one and happy to support that as we can. The other part was a little more controversial. It creates the Guardian program, which is something that has been kind of arisen in several states across the nation. We are working, of course, with the Center for School Safety and the state school marshal about what that would look like. I think there's been some concerns from law enforcement exactly what that program would allow people to do and who's doing it and who's going to train them. And so we'll keep our eye on that one as it sort of moves toward implementation. That one did become law without the signature of the governor. So we'll continue to work and kind of learn about that one as it rolls forward. House Bill 535 identifies two options to meet the civic literacy graduation requirement beginning next year. There already was in place sort of take this test, this 100-question civics test, and you could pass it that way. Now there's an option for school districts. They still have that option, but now they could instead do a 1/2 credit in civic literacy to fulfill that requirement for their students. And then finally, the last two bills that I'll just share with you are audits that are going to take place. House Bill 825 requires a very, very comprehensive audit of the Kentucky Department of Education by the Office of the Auditor of Public Accounts. We at the Kentucky Department of Education, as many of you in your agencies, we are under audit all the time. Every single day, we have auditors from somewhere, whether it's US Ed, the US Department of Agriculture, the Auditor of Public Accounts. So we get audited very frequently, but we will be undergoing another audit or a special examination. It was actually described in the bill. And it will be a year to do that. The biggest concern, audits are an opportunity to improve. And there are always things that come up in audits that you can fix and make better for the benefit of your agency and our constituents that we serve. It does have an estimated fiscal impact of $2 million on it, which will be charged to the Kentucky Department of Education. And so that does give us concern as far as the impact to our operating budget, which would then cause us to have less ability to focus on other things for the benefit of school districts and our students. And then I'm sure many of y'all have read in the news or followed along with some of the questions, concerns, comments in Jefferson County Public Schools. House Bill 6 appropriates $750,000 again to the Auditor of Public Accounts to do a special audit of the Jefferson County Public Schools. And House Resolution 81 also is something that will be implemented to conduct a task force on the efficient and effective school district governance. And there's at least some school of thought that Jefferson County will be part of that, examining the efficiency and effectiveness of that school district as part of this task force. Those are the bills that I picked out. There's lots more, as you all know, but thought those might be of interest to the members of the Continuum at this time.
Thank you, Robin. You guys were not busy at all during session.
No, not at all.
Travis Powell, I'm going to turn to you to give a brief overview of some things that have not been mentioned.
Sure. So I don't have any fancy slides to show you. So Robin, you've one-upped me again today. So Robin's used to that. We worked together a long time ago. So, but I'll just hit some budget highlights and talk a little bit about some of the bills that passed. A lot of bills proposed that we were tracking, but when I sort of take a step back and look at this, very few made it to the finish line. And in many ways, it's been a success depending on the nature of the bill. So, but first I'll start off with the budget. House Bill 6, we feel very successful for higher education. For our operating expenses, we received about a 6% increase. That's across the board for institutions. About half of that was just across the board to the institution's base budget, and the other portion of that was to cover the increases for the state fire and tornado fund contributions. The state self-insures for fire and tornado insurance. And due to all the natural disasters that have occurred over the state, that has obviously had to go up in order for the state to cover all of its expenses there. So all agencies are appropriated or allocated a portion of that expense, even CPE, but we receive all our funding from the General Assembly, so that gets taken care of in that manner. But the campuses typically are not funded for that increase and would just have to otherwise make that up out of tuition dollars. So the General Assembly was thoughtful enough to put money in the budget for those increases, so we were very thankful for that. We also received about $600 million each fiscal year for our total rather for asset preservation. That's to fix existing assets on our campuses, both KCTCS and our public universities, to help fund some of those fix those increases or those costs that we've incurred there, and helping keep our buildings up to code and up to where they need to be for our students to use them. So we're really happy about receiving asset preservation dollars. We've been successful in last two sessions in getting those dollars, but we've also received funding for new construction too. Each institution got its priority capital construction project. We're very excited about. KSU did not receive money for the project itself, but they were seeking a health sciences building. However, they did receive money for the design portion of those funds. And we expect the portion of that construction to design the building, and then they can go back in the next session and ask for dollars to pay for the construction of that project. But they did in turn receive additional dollars for asset preservation, and that's a huge need on their campus. So they were very pleased with that as well. There are a few other special projects that were also funded. House Bill 1 had some appropriations in it as well. Murray State University and University of Louisville received dollars for $8.5 million for cybersecurity programs on their campuses. And Murray also received $10 million for a vet tech program. Just a couple of examples of some additional projects that were funded in House Bill 1. So as far that's the main issues related to budget, I think. There was a budget cleanup bill. If you want to take a look at it, Senate Bill 191, something they passed at the very end of the session that made a few other appropriations and modified some language in the budget bill. If you want to take a look at that, nothing major to report there on the higher ed side for that, but just sort of to complete the budget picture, that's another item to take a look at. But as far as bills that passed that we were tracking, we had three studies. Senate Joint Resolution 132 is a furtherance of Senate Joint Resolution 98, was study completed by CP last year that was to look at college four-year institution offerings in Southeast Kentucky. And one of the recommendations out of that report was to potentially expand Hazard Community and Technical College and making it offer four-year degrees. So this resolution requires to further study what that might look like and expanding that campus and adding a residential component to Hazard Community and Technical College, and also building out its offerings of baccalaureate degrees. We also, Senate Joint Resolution 170 passed. That was sort of the outcome of, I'm sure you probably heard about Murray State University seeking a new veterinary medicine school, and Eastern Kentucky University seeking an osteopathic medical school, and then Western Kentucky University seeking to offer PhDs. And so there were separate bills filed on all those subjects, but the ultimate resolution came through this joint resolution, which requires that CP study a potential post-baccalaureate offering for all 6 comprehensive universities in the state. And we know at least what 2 of those are going to be. We know obviously they're the ones I just mentioned, and those are called out in the bill. And then WKU's will be a PhD program. We just don't know which one. And then we'll have to talk with the other campuses to see what their priority post-baccalaureate program would be. And then we'll study the feasibility of those programs. CP received some funding for that project. So we're certainly pleased with that. It does require that we go out and contract for that study. Senate Joint Resolution 179 requires a study on just an overall study on the KCTCS system. We are not responsible for that study, but KCTCS is ultimately the one responsible for submitting that report, but they're to do so in collaboration with CPE. So we'll be working with KCTCS to look at the offerings that they have, program offerings that they have at their campuses, functions of the central office, potential single accreditation for the system, items of that nature that we'll work with KCTCS to study. Just a few other bills that I'll mention. Senate Bill 1 creates a framework for an endowed research endowment, a program that would allow funds to be allocated to an endowment in order to fund collaborative research projects between institutions, to provide seed funding for innovative research. The bill was passed and the framework was enacted, but there's been no funding provided to that. So we'll be able to put the framework in place, and we'll see maybe if they fund it in upcoming sessions. They always fund some things in the interim, so that's a possibility, but no money was provided to that program as of yet. So stay tuned there. And then Senate Bill 127 is an Aerospace Education Reinvestment Opportunity Fund. It's similar to the Healthcare Workforce Initiative that was passed for House Bill 200 last session, that allows CPE to provide one-to-one dollar matches for private dollars to pay for scholarships and incentive funds for high-performing programs. Similar for this is a similar program in the aerospace industry. And again, this bill was passed, but no funding was provided to it. We do have some statutory deadlines in this one to meet for regulations to be filed, but again, we'll see about funding for it. But so far, just the bill passed with no funding. But those are the big items, and I'm happy to answer any questions that anybody might have on anything related to higher education in the session.
And actually, Travis, for time, I'm going to have them put, oh, go ahead, Jenny. Because Beth, I want to make sure you have time to share your update. Go ahead. Oh, Jenny, go ahead. You can ask your question. I'm sorry.
I believe Kia got another $10 million to extend the Kia Innovative Scholarship for refugees and asylum students for the next 2 years. So that was really positive. And then didn't Kia get some increased funding for CAP, particularly in KTG, to accommodate the increased number of Pell students that we'll have with the new program? Okay.
Yes, we did receive significant additional funding for CAP, and in a good amount of funding for KTG as well, what we had requested. So it was very positive, and also an increase in work ready funding, and the money for the pilot project to continue for another biennium.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, and I'll just mention, since we're talking about scholarships on the dual credit scholarship program, that the changes there was a bill filed to change the rate there from 1/3 to 1/2. The bill didn't pass, but again, this was captured again in the budget bill, and allow for 2 career technical education courses per academic year and 4 general education dual credit courses over junior and senior years, up to a maximum of 12 approved credit hours. That's the same as it was before, but it got continued to, the bill didn't, the permanent language didn't pass, but it got captured in the budget bill again. So I'll just mention that.
Yeah, all really good news. Beth, I'm going to let you round us out today. You've been so patient. Thank you, Travis, so much.
You're welcome.
Lots going on.
Lots of exciting things across all of our partners. So I'll try to be very brief because I know we're past time at this point. But just wanted to share that the 24-26 biennial budget provided the Education Labor Cabinet with a very trim budget. Unfortunately, we lost our general fund appropriation for Everybody Counts program. However, we are working diligently to identify other funding resources to be able to carry this program forward. And some of our additional funding requests weren't advanced, including unemployment insurance jobs on day one, which is focusing on reentry. But again, we're going to fund those types of activities through partnerships, as well as we had proposed a subsidy for employers through the Office of Employer and Apprenticeship for registered apprenticeship programs. So we're going to work very hard to find within our other resources the ability to advance those. We did receive funding for a new unemployment insurance system, as well as new case management system for our workforce folks, and received money for KY Stats to continue support of the state longitudinal data system, which is important, as you all know, as their funding of that is on a very cyclical basis. So additionally, in House Bill 1, there were some one-time appropriations, which include $500,000 each year of fiscal year for Boys and Girls Club of Kentucky Alliance to support work readiness and academic programs. It also included $10 million a year. The appropriation went to Kentucky and It Works, but will go to all local workforce boards, be distributed, that $10 million across the system to support youth workforce development efforts that are not as restrictive, if you would, of the eligibility requirements with the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. So we're excited about that. And a number of appropriations were included for local libraries through the Department of Local Government. So it was an interesting twist on providing those resources to local libraries, but we're thrilled for the opportunity. As far as legislation in general, the cabinet successfully put to rest several bills removing worker protections and regulations, including House Bill 255, which aimed to alter child labor laws, House Bill 500, which focused on rollback of paid meals, breaks, time things. House Bill 347 that sought to roll back Kentucky OSHA regulations. So the safe, making sure that young people are not working in hazardous occupations. We also worked with folks on Senate Bill 140, which amended federal guidelines around unemployment insurance repayments associated with COVID. We successfully worked with the majority on Senate Bill 128 to provide safe employment opportunities for at-risk youth, garnering support from both sides of the aisle. Specific education and workforce bills, Senate Joint Resolution 176, which creates the Workforce Attraction and Retention Task Force. This is located in the Cabinet for Economic Development, but it will be a study performed by a third party that will be due November 1st. And I mentioned Senate Bill 128 about youth employment programs and just creating a safe place for at-risk youth to go to work. Senate Joint Resolution 79 did not pass, which would have been a study of workforce development programs and making recommendations to serve untapped populations. But I think the work of the Education Workforce Collaborative has moved so far. I think that kind of brought that to an end. And then House Bill 720, which would have created a new adult education, adult workforce diploma pilot in KDE, did not pass. We have a similar program going on in the Office of Adult Education in the department. And to bring it home, Senate Bill 138, which focused on trying to establish singular licensing for proprietary schools and applicants. So it would have been an overarching for those proprietary schools as opposed to each site, and that was defeated. So that's where I will leave it. Happy to, folks want to follow up after the meeting to talk about any of these in detail, happy to do so.
Beth, thank you so much. And thanks for hanging in there with us. Y'all, we had so much information we did not realize that needed to be shared today. So thank you for hanging with us. We will follow up with a PowerPoint and information contact for the work groups, and we'll keep you informed. Our next meeting is August 21st. It is virtual from 1 to 3, and we look forward to seeing you. If you need us, you can reach out. Otherwise, thank you for your time and participation and feedback. Have a great afternoon.
Sure.